All right, well, cool. Thank you very much for everyone for coming. My name is Abdel. I'm going to show you. So before I get started, how many people here expected this to be like more hands-on because it's in the title? A bunch of you, right? OK, cool. So I submitted the talk initially for a hands-on workshop for more than 50 minutes. But unfortunately, this is the slot they gave me. But we're going to make the most out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a bunch of material, a bunch of demos, a bunch of various things. There is some code, there is some slides. And then at the end, I'm going to leave you with Google Cloud accounts and code labs that you can do at home. So I provisioned accounts for hopefully everybody in this room. You will be able to create them just from your phone. You don't need your laptop. But there will be 2 URLs at the end that you will have to keep somewhere bookmarked in your browser. One of them would be the account itself, and everybody will have an individual Google Cloud account with $300 worth of credits, so you'll have enough resources to be able to experiment with everything AI we have on Google Cloud. And the second one is basically a doc that contains links to the various code labs that I suggest you do when you have some time at home. My name is Abdel. I'm a developer advocate at Google. I co-host a podcast called the Kubernetes Podcast by Google. I'm going to actually talk a little bit about Kubernetes in the context of AI. That's why my talk is called Practical Gen AI. I mostly work on Kubernetes, Istio, and Service Mesh. These are like my area of focus, if you want. But I've been discussing with some people, and I told them I should probably stop introducing myself this way and start introducing myself as I travel for food to run, and sometimes I give talks. So before I get going, just acknowledgements. All the slides I am using today, I happily copied them from my colleague Guillaume, who is in the room. So the only thing I hope is my demos will work today, because you had some hard time with your demos yesterday. The demos themselves, some are from my colleagues, including Guillaume, and some are mine. But the slides, I just didn't want to bother. And like any lazy developer advocate, I just copied work from somebody else. So let's get going. Let's talk about a little bit few notions. This is probably the 10 times this year that somebody walk you through notions of what LLMs and AI are. But I'm going to try to make it quick so we are all kind of like speaking the same language. Basically, AI is the generic term we use for anything where we train a machine to mimic human behavior. So AI is sort of like the big field. Inside AI, you have machine learning, which is the practical way, the techniques, the models, the frameworks that you would use to train and run a machine learning model. Inside machine learning, there is a subset called deep learning, which is just a type of machine learning that uses neural networks. All of this needs data science on the side. So when people say, I do data science, essentially what it means is that they are working in the area where they are preparing, cleaning the data that is used to train machine learning or to train a machine learning model. And then generative AI is just a subset of deep learning. It's just a technique that applies deep learning with neural network to one specific use case. One of those specific use cases is image generation. So image generation is a type of generative AI, or LLMs, large language models, right? So this is just like kind of visualization that Guillaume created, which I like, to kind of allow you to position yourself and kind of like know what people talk about when they say. The thing also is that a lot of times people use AI and machine learning kind of alternatively, or like they say AI when they mean deep learning, and they say LLMs when they mean AI. But basically, AI is just like the big field. And inside AI, there is a lot of applications. Google basically invented a type of architecture that made AI kind of what it is today, right? And that type of architecture is called the transformers model. It all came through a paper that was released in 2017. And the title of that paper was All You Need Is Attention, I think. And that's kind of what kickstarted this whole large language models revolution. Just if you feel like, if you all feel like large language models and ChatGPT is something for 2023, it is really from 2023 when it was released. But this stuff have been in the work for the last few years, right? Then in 2018, we introduced our first language model called BERT. 2018 also we introduced something called AlphaFold. I don't know how many people here have heard about AlphaFold. Few people. Okay. For those of you who doesn't know what AlphaFold is, in biology, folding is a mechanism by which you can predict how a protein evolves in a live cell, right? And this is important in biology because most viruses or most infectious diseases actually have a protein. And once you know how a protein folds, aka develops, you can know what impact it will have on the cells it lives in, and you can also make antidotes. And before AlphaFolds, which is a project that came out of DeepMind, it used to take roughly 1 PhD to figure out the 3D model of a protein. So in 2018, AlphaFold or DeepMind came up with this machine learning model that can predict the 3D model of a protein structure, right? And it's freely available for everyone to use. 2019, we introduced our first text-to-text transformer-based model, or LLM. And then 2021, we introduced Lambda. 2022, we introduced Palm. And then last year, we introduced Palm 2 and Gemini, which is our last most capable machine learning model. And so just a quick primer on how these models work. There is this link in the slides, which is actually really cool. It goes through a lot of details explaining how generative AI works. And I'm not going to walk through all of it, because it's too long and probably too boring for this. But essentially, the way you can think about it is, if you write a text to an LLM, then the LLM takes that text and splits it into individual words called tokens. A token is not necessarily always a full word. It could be a half a word. It can be 2 words together. And then it goes and processes that token and tries to figure out what are all the logical other tokens that can be put together to make a sentence, right? And this is all based on statistics. So it essentially goes for the word work, what is the most statistically possible next word and previous word that can make it, that can be put together so that it can make a phrase, right? Like a phrase that makes sense. And so then it also calculates what are the kind of the words that doesn't make sense, like the word that you would not find next to a token, right? So this is an example: work down, work lives, work zebra. No one uses this in natural language. And then it goes through a process where it processes the phrases, and that's what we call embeddings. And that's coming through the training data, right? So the training data inside the model has all the possible tokens. And then there is like a very complicated process which uses a bunch of parameters and a bunch of techniques to basically try to identify what's the kind of next logical word in a sentence is going to be. This kind of like, put it very simply, this is the basic idea of how a generative AI model works. If you have played with any generative AI model before, you probably have heard of something called a temperature, which is just one parameter that you can give to the LLM. And a temperature is a value that can go from 0 to 1. And you would know that if you would give an LLM a 0, then it will produce sentences that make sense. And the more you go toward 1, or maybe it's the other way around, I forget. I don't remember. But like, the more you go toward one end of this spectrum from 0 to 1, the more careful the LLM is going to be. And the more you go toward the other end, the more creative it's going to be. Let's just put it this way. And the way it does that is by basically modifying the way it statistically calculates what is the next logical word in a sentence, to put it very mildly. So what is a large language model? It's basically a transformer-based neural network, which is used to recognize, predict, and generate human language, right? They're usually trained with huge data sets. This is an example of Palm 2, which have been trained on 3.6 trillion tokens. So that's 3.6 trillion individual words or combination of words. And 340 billion parameters. Parameters are just basically the neurals inside the model, right? The number of neurals that makes the neural network does what it does. So it statistically calculates the relationships between words and phrases. and sort of like try to mimic the human language, essentially. And what you can do with those LLMs is that you can fine-tune them so they can perform or execute very specific tasks, right? For example, again, borrowing another example from Guillaume's work is taking the documentation of Groovy, feeding it into an LLM, and then using the LLM to basically ask questions about the documentation. So that's essentially an existing LLM which can recognize, predict, and generate human language, but it was fine-tuned to a specific task, right? There is a website that basically lists all the existing LLMs and basically their sizes and how many parameters they support and how many words or tokens they have been trained on. It's on this website. This is just one. This is not very up to date because just this week, GPT-4o was released, and also we announced Gemini Flash 2 days ago at Google I/O. So, and those are even bigger, even more performant, even faster LLMs. But just to give you a kind of an idea about the kind of scale of how these things are evolving, and they're evolving actually very fast, right? So before I get going, if you're curious about why things are evolving at the speed they're evolving at, and how are these companies able to move this fast, there is data. There is, like, the internet is full of data, so it's kind of relatively easy to train machine learning models on these things. But it really boils down to how much money you're willing to spend. Because training machine learning models takes so much resources. They are usually trained on GPUs, and GPUs are not cheap. So it's essentially most of these startups that are doing LLMs, they're just burning through VC money, spending it on cloud providers so they can get as much GPUs as they can to be able to train an even more bigger, faster machine learning model. And there is also a lot of other kind of advancements that are being figured out. And I'm going to talk about one specific implementation detail that a lot of people don't, maybe a lot of you are aware of in a second. Yeah, so use cases, the most basic ones are language-based use cases, so writing, summarizing, generating idea, classifications, etc. Code, most of you are developers, I guess, so that's basically something you're already aware of. You probably have used GitHub Copilot, or you have probably used Gemini Code Assist. How many people here have used Gemini Code Assist? 2 people, all right. We are the #1 marketing company in the world, and we're doing a very bad job marketing our own products. So we have our own Copilot called Gemini Code Assist, which is a plugin in Visual Code that you can basically also use to generate code, explain code, do all these things that Copilot can do. Speech to text, text to speech, that's very classic example. Image generation, editing, captioning, generating description from videos, that's also a very valid use case where you can feed the LLM a video and it will generate a description of what it sees. We have all seen it in the OpenAI demo recently. There was also a demo with Gemini Flash at Google I/O where the user is pointing the phone to a scene and asking the model, what do you see? And the model is able to basically detect live. So that's like live capturing videos and then feeding them through the LLM and then generating a description. So what does that all mean for Google Cloud, right? For us specifically. And this is, I promise this is not like sales pitch. I'm not here to sell you anything. So we have basically models. Palm and Gemini are the big ones, but we have a bunch of other ones. We have Imagine, which is a model for generating images, et cetera, et cetera. You can use them through the Gemini app. There is actually an app. I think now it became available in Europe, right? Yeah, thank you. I get a thumbs up. It was only available in the US for a while, but now you can actually install the app and use it to talk to the Gemini model. You can, if you're a developer and you don't really care about Google Cloud, you can just use the Google AI Studio. So Google AI Studio is ai.google.dev, and this will allow you to basically generate an API key and use a client library to write code that basically calls the API and interacts with the model. So from this interface, you'll be able to try out code, generate the API key, and then you have some code examples here that you can use, right? So that's the AI Studio. Then we have something called Vertex AI. So Vertex AI is our cloud solution for AI stuff. Inside of it, there is something called the Model Garden. You can think about it as just a marketplace for models, essentially. So we have our own models in it, but we also have third-party models. So you have Claude 3, Claude 2, Llama, Falcon, Stable Diffusion, et cetera, et cetera. And then there is a bunch of features built on top of this. So you can do text, Visio, et cetera, et cetera. I can show you a very simple example here. Let me switch to my console. And if I go to AI model, I can go to Vertex AI, for example. And I can, let's see. Let's, for example, try, well, this is the Model Garden here. So in the Model Garden, you'll be able to search for any model you want. And either try it out. Well, this is not, I have to enable it, but let's pick another one which doesn't require enabling. Claude 3 maybe, because that's one is preview. So let's see this one. They all need enabling. Okay, well, let's see. Let's use Imagine, for example. So you can click on Imagine, and then you will be able to open it in something called Vertex AI Studio, which is sort of like notebooks, and then just upload the pictures. And I am just going to upload. Let's upload. I'll upload my own headshot, because why not, right? And then I can generate a caption. And hopefully, I have never, this is actually dangerous to do. I have never tried this demo before, so let's see. A man with glasses and a beard is wearing a Google Cloud shirt, right? So it's able to see stuff. I can do same thing. Actually, I tried this today. Hello, Krakow. So that's text-to-speech. And I can just submit it, and it will generate.
Hello, Krakow.
Right, and you can also choose like what kind of language and what kind of like voice do you want to have. There is also speech to text. There is a bunch of stuff like this, right? Anyway, so what does that mean for you actually as developers? So basically, Vertex AI has a set of clients in Java or in multiple programming languages, but including Java, and you can just literally use the client to call Vertex AI, right? So let me show you an example here. I have it here. If I go to my source, Java. By the way, before I click run, I am not a Java developer. So if you've seen something here that is not supposed to be here, just bear that in mind, right? I mostly built most of these demos using Stack Overflow, which is what most of you does anyway. So it doesn't really matter. All right, so let's run this. I'll walk you through the code. I'm basically imported the Vertex AI libraries here, right? Then I basically do a try-catch, and I create a model object using generative model. Then I create a chat session, because you are able basically to create a session, and then you can send a message, get a response, and then send that response back with the next question, so you have like, context essentially. And then I just call the function chat session send message, hello, and then print out the results. I send actually three questions. So if I go down here, hello, it's nice to meet you, how can I assist you? And then the next question is, what are all the colors in the rainbow? It tells me what the colors in the rainbow are. And then why does it appear when it rains? And it tells me why rainbows appear when it rains, right? So this is a very simple example using directly the Vertex AI client library. It can also so of course, one thing I forgot to miss, obviously, to say is, because Vertex AI is just the API itself that you can invoke, and then behind it, we have all the models available, you have to specify the model name. And in this case, I use the Gemini Pro model name, right? I can also do something like this. So Gemini comes in two kind of variations. There is Gemini and Gemini Vision. So one is text-based and one is text and vision-based. And then the Pro essentially means one of the three available versions. There is the Nano, which can be embedded in like mobile devices. There is the Ultra, which is the most capable one, and the Pro is kind of like the more generic use cases or general use cases model. So in this particular case, I have a picture here. It's a picture of a sunset. And I can just feed it to the model using what is it? Yeah, using just a function in Java. And then I call the model using the Gemini Pro Vision. And then I tell it, basically, tell me what do you see in the image, right? So this is when when people say that Gemini or any model is multimodal, multimodal essentially means it can understand text and vision at the same time. So here I'm sending both a picture and then also a question. And hopefully, if my code works, then I should get a response, right? Yeah, OK, so image was read successfully, good. And then the next, the image is a sunset, blah, 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 blah. So basically, the demo works, right? So this is like at the most basic version, how you could interact with Vertex AI through Java, right? With the client library. And the client libraries for Vertex AI are available in multiple other programming languages, including Python and Go, and basically like all the other libraries we have. So what is Gemini? Gemini is the most, basically it's coming out of Google research. It's the most capable model that we have. It's a multimodal, as I said, so text, image, and videos. It comes in 3 sizes. So there are 3 sizes and variations. So the sizes are Nano, Ultra, Pro, Ultra, and then Flash. So 4 sizes, technically. That was wrong. I added it this morning. I forgot to update the number. Because Flash was just released 2 days ago at Google I/O. It supports function calling. So function calling essentially means you can ask the model to call an external function to get like some extra information. I'll think of an example in a second and can tell you what that means, what people use for function calling. And it's a pretty capable model. It's pretty big. So there are multiple versions, but the last one we released is 1.5. And 1.5 can actually support 1 hour of video, 11 hours of audio, 30,000 lines of code, and 700,000 words. I am quite sure that Flash is even more capable, but I did not update the slide. So the new version, which is called Flash, is even probably more capable. So I showed you how we can play with Vertex AI and Gemini through Java. I also showed you the AI Studio. You can also have some code examples here in the AI Studio. So these are just some code examples. For example, I can get like a recipe creator example, which basically generates recipes, right? So this is an example where I can tell it, OK, I have a picture. Can you identify what's in the picture? And it will tell me, well, it's somewhere here. Come on. It's coming. It's not very visible, sorry about that, but it generated it. But what's cool here is that you can get the code, right? You can click Get Code, and then you can basically just get the actual code in Python, Kotlin, Swift, JavaScript, et cetera, et cetera. You can even get like just a curl command, right? So this is essentially interacting with Gemini through the Google AI Studio without going through Google Cloud. In Google Cloud, Vertex AI is the way to go, and I already showed that. Then if you don't want to use any of this stuff, if you don't care about Vertex AI, if you don't care about Gemini, we have open models. And open models are essentially open weights, which means the weights are publicly accessible, and you can download them and look at them. And Gemma itself, so we call it Gemma, and Gemma itself was derived from the work that created Gemini. So it's not as capable as Gemini, but it's pretty capable. So there are a couple of ways you could use Gemma. The most basic way is you can run it locally, right? So I have an example here. Let me just find it. 1 second. What is it? I think it's there. Yes, I think it's there, 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 and there, right? So you will have to download Olama, which is a command line tool. And then with Ollama, you can just run Ollama, run Gemma. And so Gemma comes in two versions or two weights. There is 2B and 7B, so that's 2 billion parameters and 7 billion parameters. And you can just run Ollama, run Gemma. I already ran it, so if I do Ollama list, I have already my Gemma model running. And then if I want to interact with it, I could just run a curl. So it's running locally on my host, on my workstation, and it's listening on port 11434. And so what I can do is I can just curl it this way. And here I'm telling it, asking it question, why is the sky blue? So one thing to keep in mind is on this specific workstation I'm working on, there is no GPU. So Gemma is running actually on CPU. And you will see that because once I send my request, it will start responding with one phrase at a time. Because it's not able, there is no GPU, so it's not able to do a lot of calculations. So it's basically spitting out the words as it's calculating them, right? So then I'm going to stop it here because this is too long. I could do some curl wizardry and try to get like a cohesive paragraph answer. I'm not going to do that. I want to jump straight into, also I can also just use the Ollama chat model. So this is just a library that allows you to interact with Ollama itself. And then with that, I can just make a call to the local model that I'm running. So if I go there and run this, then I should have an output that tells me why the sky is blue, right? Or present yourself. This is the name of the model and who trained you. I am a large language model trained by Google, blah, 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 right? You get the point. But this is kind of not the best way to use Gemma because we're not leveraging any GPUs. What we have done is we spent a bunch of time trying to make Gemma run on Kubernetes. And because I work for Google, I'm going to use our version of Kubernetes, which is GKE. How many people here are Kubernetes users? Have used Kubernetes before? Few people. Cool. If you don't know, I mean, at this stage, I assume everybody knows, at least have an idea what Kubernetes is, even if you don't use it. To use Kubernetes, you interact with it using YAML, right? The best programming language. And essentially here, I just created the deployment. And in that deployment, I deployed the model called Gemma. So the inference server itself is called TGI. So that's just the piece of software that runs and presents a REST API to you and then passes those requests to the model itself. Because models are, generally speaking, just big binary files. They don't come with the serving software, so usually you need an extra piece of software to do the serving for you. Locally, I used Ollama, and then on GKE, I can use TGI. There is also a VLLM, and there is a bunch of other serving software. And here I'm going to stop and just mention something. Remember earlier when I talked about the fact that there is a bunch of things in those large language models which we are still figuring out? Inference is one of them. Essentially, inference is still a big, big open question for a lot of companies. And the way we're doing it is essentially we're driving the car down the highway 120 kilometers an hour while changing the tires. So TGI, VLLM, and all the serving software that exists today have been created like this year or kind of end of last year. So one very common problem that we are trying to figure out how to solve them is the fact that most LLMs are not able to parallelize processing across multiple requests. What I mean by that is if you send a request to the LLM, it can process that specific request, but then it cannot, while it's processing that request, it cannot process the next one. So it will just cache it and wait until the first processing is finished. So there are a couple of, so this means basically for each compute cycle that the LLM executes, it can only process one request. Depending on the size of the request, that could mean that the LLM could waste cycles, especially if the requests have been like small questions, like hi, right? And so what most LLMs do, or what most serving software do, is that they batch requests. So as requests are coming in, they would just batch them and then wait for that batch to fill up and let the LLM process whatever was already in the previous batch, right? So there are a couple of techniques that have been created recently to kind of try to solve this problem, but this is something for you to kind of keep in mind, and maybe you want to go do some research around it or dig into it. Basically, the TLDR to this is the reason why sometimes it feels like LLMs are slow to answer is because of this problem. Sometimes also it's because they're overwhelmed, like there's too many people trying to use the LLM, and it's in the process of scaling up or it's at capacity. The other thing also, and this is also worth mentioning, is that scaling up in the LLM world, specifically with Kubernetes, is also another still fully unsolved problem. Each of these models is typically few gigabytes of data. And so if you have used Kubernetes before, you know that when you deploy something to Kubernetes, you send your YAML file, and then there is a bunch of wizardry that Kubernetes does, and then eventually your container has to run on a node. But if that container contains the model, the weights, and it's basically 10 or 20 gigabytes of data, then that container will take time to come up because it has to be downloaded on the node, right? So this means that scaling up and scaling down, or scaling up specifically, is essentially the same problem as running monolith applications, because it just takes so much time for the model to be downloaded and then executed. And if you're running on Kubernetes and you're running on a cloud provider, you know that even scaling up the cluster itself takes time because the node has to be created. So all of these kind of delays adds up when it comes into scaling up and down machine learning models on Kubernetes. So in this particular example, I'm running with 2 CPUs and 25 gigabytes of memory, and I am requesting 2 GPUs. So here I'm going to use GPUs specifically. And yeah, so let's give it a try. Actually, I don't have to give it a try. I know it works, but it's just to create the illusion that it might not work. OK, so my model is running. It's been running for 5 days. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a kubectl port forward. If you don't know what that means, it's essentially I'm running on a remote Kubernetes cluster, and I need to be able to access the API. So instead of exposing it to the internet, I'm just doing a port forward on it. And then here, I'm just going to do a user prompt, and then execute a curl command toward my model, right? So if I do this, I don't know if you noticed something, but you see that the API here, the path for the API is different. When I was using Ollama to run my model locally, the API path looked like this, right? Different port, different path. On the GKE example or the Kubernetes example, it's localhost generate, and that's essentially the serving software itself. So Ollama has a different path essentially compared to the TGI, which is the one I'm using on Kubernetes. And then, of course, that's not going to work. So I have to figure out why. Oh, yeah, of course. So let's go ahead and do this. And that should just give me a prompt back to tell me what Java is. Yeah, all right. Popular programming language, blah, 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 blah. Right? So that's, in a nutshell, Gemma running both locally on CPU and on GKE with GPUs. The last bit, or the last kind of puzzle in this whole, the last component in this whole puzzle is a framework called LangChain for J. So if you have been doing AI and AI, specifically machine learning for a while, you know that like most stuff are written in Java, right? And that basically leaves you, the Java developers, because I am not, in a situation where like you don't have to learn Java, Python, and you don't want necessarily to write Python code, right? So there is a framework called LangChain, which is written in Python, which was written for LLM applications. And the Java community came up with this framework called LangChain for J. So LangChain for J is a framework that marries LangChain and Java and gives you a framework that allows you to basically do a bunch of things, including interacting with AI models. The way LangChain for J have been built is that everything that users need for every or almost every use case related to interacting with the model is built into LangChain4j itself. And then the part where it integrates with the various LLM providers like OpenAI, Google, et cetera, that's left to the providers to do, right? So in our case, Guillaume is one of the people who contribute on the LangChain4j integration with Vertex AI, right? And there is also the same for Llama, and same for Claude, and the same for Hugging Face, et cetera, et cetera. But to give you an example of exactly what I'm talking about, let's say, for example, you have a document, and you're trying to take that document and feed it into an LLM to get a resume, to get like a caption, or like get to resume it, right? So the functions or the functionalities that you will need to load the document, extract the text, split the text, do all that stuff is built into LangChain4j itself. So in a nutshell, what this means is if you're writing code using LangChain4j, your code will be almost portable. You can basically just change the LLM behind by just changing which LLM you call using the specific integration for that LLM. But most of your code should be reusable across multiple implementations of LLMs. Does this make sense? All right. So it's very powerful. It's built with OK, these slides are old. I have to update them. But basically, it has support for a lot of LLMs. Like in our case, it supports Gemini, it supports Palm, it supports Imagine, it supports all of these LLMs. It's easy to containerize, and it's actually pretty sweet. So I can show you an example very quickly. And this is actually one example, which is a code lab that I'd like you to explore or to check later, which is somewhere here. OK, let me find it. Give me a second. Here we go. I think this is it. Yes. So this is an example where I used LangChain4j to interact with Vertex AI. So I import my LangChain4j dependencies, and then I just get like an object, which is the Vertex AI Gemini chat model. So this is a class specifically for Vertex AI with Gemini. Also, there is a class for Palm. There is a class for all the other models we have. And there are classes for OpenAI and all the other LLM providers. And then I just say, OK, I want to use the Gemini Pro. I have to create a message. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say LangChain4j has built in all the functionalities you need for LLMs. Those objects are basically the same. You would use the same objects regardless of which LLM you are interacting with. So if I execute this code, then I should basically get. So yeah, I'm asking the model, tell me a joke, and then why did this crow win an award? Whatever. I don't know if you'll find this funny or not. But anyway, here we go. So that's LangChain4j. There's actually a video that one of the maintainers of LangChain4j, Lisa, did a talk at Devox Belgium. I highly encourage you to check it out. You can see here on the left side the list of all the supported integrations. So Azure, Google, Hugging Face, etc. And there is probably more. This slide this slide is probably old. And then you also have integrations for embedding stores. You have integration for vector databases. You have integration for document loaders. And so yeah, so you have basically most of the functionalities you will need to interact with an LLM plus the integration with very specific LLMs. So I have 10 minutes left. I want to leave you with the accounts and the code labs, and then I will also leave time for questions. So I will ask you to pull your phones and scan this first URL. So this will take you to a page which you will have to single sign on and then create a GCP account. So I will, once you have done this, I'll walk you through the flow of how this works. By the way, this is the document that contains all the material that I highly encourage you to do after this. And the first link here is the link, sorry, this link here is the link that I showed the QR code before. So this is the same link toward the actual account setup. So once you sign in, you see this page. You will have to single sign on with Google. And that should take you through a flow where you can just create a billion accounts and create a GCP project. So once you sign on, then you will have to click here to access your credits, and that should give you an account with $300 of credits valid for 180 days, or until you run out of the credits, right? The second one is this QR code, and this QR code will lead you to the doc that contains all the material for what was supposed to be the hands-on lab of this talk, but unfortunately it didn't. All right, I'll just leave it there for a few seconds. So this will lead you to the Google Doc I showed earlier, and in it you will have the slides for this talk, the repo with all the code I demonstrated, and then all the code labs that I encourage you to check out. And yeah, with that, I think that's all I have for you. This is my LinkedIn if you want to keep in touch. And thank you very much. I hope this was useful. I've been told I should show a QR code for Slido. So this is Slido if you want to submit questions, and we already have one. How are images tokenized? Is there some coded pre-processing, or is it all done by neural network? What information do image token contains? I mean, that's a very good question. I've never really looked into it, but I would assume it just looks into the individual pixels, and the information is RGB, so the color of each pixel, and maybe grouping pixels in a way that makes the model understand it. The reason why I think this question is quite difficult to answer is because it depends if you are doing image generation or if you are doing image recognition. But Guillaume, do you have maybe a better answer?
No, yeah, I don't know exactly how they encode the token.
OK. So you have no idea neither. OK. Somebody said it was $5, not $300. It's $5 plus 300. 300 is the default trial amount for every newly created GCP project. So I did not walk you through all the flow. The page says $5, but once you walk through the flow, you create a billing account and you create a GCP project, and you will have $300 plus 5. All right, next one. Why did you use Stack Overflow and not the Gemini Assist for the demo? Why did you use Stack? I did not use. Did I use? No, I did not use Stack Overflow. Oh yeah, to generate the code. Yeah, to generate the code. That's a very good question. When I was building the demos, I think Gemini God Assist was not good enough. So it was easier to just find examples on Stack Overflow because LangChain for J existed for a while. So that's the reason. All right. I don't know if you have any more questions, maybe in the audience. I mean, either this was useful or no one understood anything I was talking about in the last 40 minutes. All right, well, if you have no question, oh, we do have questions. What data do we use to train the code assist? That's a very good question. I have no idea. I have to look into it. I have no idea what do we use to train the code assist. I assume we use probably internal code, as long as it doesn't contain PII, like any, or IP, any intellectual property. And maybe Stack Overflow as well. But I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't know. All right. If there are no more questions, then I will just leave my slide up with my LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you very much again.